You haven't.
Fantastic, man. I got to say to you, the website, nothing new has been written on it since 2007. So the message is really advanced. So it's really at the level now.
Yeah, I use it a lot. It's really, I haven't bought the book Quest. I want to buy it. I just haven't gotten around to it. But yes, no, I like it all. I like how you formatted the website, and love all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, there's a ton of new stuff coming out. This is like the first of a new wave. So I'm kind of planning doing loads more of these kind of talks. That's great. That's great. So, okay, I guess we can begin. Okay, I guess we can. So how does this work? So just basically, I just make sure. I just gonna make sure I can share my diagrams. Hang on. So share screen. Go to my diagrams. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so basically, like tonight's talk is going to be about this question of system change or paradigm shift or shift in consciousness. I mean, people talk about it, but no one knows how to do it. So people like Greta Thunberg, system change, not climate change, all the Extinction Rebellion people, and there's this idea that there's kind of idea that revolution is brewing in this world. Even hedge fund managers have meetings and they're warned, look, capitalism isn't working. There's something, something's going to change, something's going to give. So the question is, how do you do a system change peacefully for the entire world in a way that's, pretty quickly, and also in a way that's peaceful? That's the question. That's the multi-million-dollar question. Now, it's almost like an impossible thing to ask or answer. I mean, it's almost like many political theorists think that the age of revolution and system change is over. It's something of the past. But there is an answer. It's always been there. And historically, it's been what's caused all these revolutions to work in the past. And we're going to go right into what this kind of answer is. Okay. Now, how can I see myself? Okay, there's me seeing myself. Okay, so there's this thing called system change, or basically trying to start revolutionary movements. I mean, how do you do it? I mean, how can you possibly in this world of a kind of things are so ordered, kind of like the powers of state seem so kind of the grip on power seems so kind of hard to envisage how any kind of dramatic change can happen in any kind of modern industrialized country, let alone the world. But how would you do it? Historically, there's always been this answer, and we're going to examine what it is. If we kind of like go through what some of the leading commentators are saying about how to do a kind of national revolution or global system change, then they kind of touch on what the answer is, but they can't quite articulate the answer that they're suggesting. So we'll quickly just go through the context of current ideas on system change, just to set the scene of some of the ideas that are currently out there. So in this diagram, you can see these are mainly left-wing thinkers. So maybe I'll talk about something about the right wing and the kind of conservative right. Now, generally, the conservative right doesn't really want system change. They don't want change of any kind, in fact. But even in the right, conservative right, and the kind of there's kind of voices saying things are not quite right. So Douglas Murray is a kind of commentator. He's a, he says some awful things about Islam. He's a bit of a kind of a bit of a hate monger, but he says some sensible things. But it's a conservative right-wing ideologue. Okay, even he says that European culture, the West, suffers from an existential tiredness. And he thinks the cause is that the story of the West has run out. And he thinks a new story has to take its place, but he doesn't know what that is. Okay. And someone like Jordan Peterson, again, another conservative thinker, he calls himself an English liberal of that kind of mindset. But he's really a conservative. And if he says things like, you shouldn't try and change things. If you try and change things, you only make things worse, because that's a very liberal mindset. Sorry, a very conservative mindset. Now, even he says basically that he's not sure that the current system has the answers to do with global warming, to do with ecological collapse, and to do with this kind of like this real social unrest brewing, especially you see it in the United States. So even voices from the right are saying that things are not quite right now. Now, if we look at a diagram, we just go through some of these kind of like left-wing kind of more progressive leaning voices. What are they saying? Okay, what are they saying? Chris Hedges is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and he's always clamoring for revolution. So he's quite hardcore. Now he is saying that in order for the revolution to happen, there needs to be a new ideological framework. He thinks that without this new ideological framework, all these protests, all these kind of social movements now will come to nothing. Okay. Now, David Harvey is a hardcore Marxist academic based in the UK. Now, he's written lots of books about Marxism and about, especially after the economic collapse in 2008, his books really have been selling well. So a Marxist theorist and also academic says, what needs to happen is a revolution in mental conceptions. Now, he doesn't know where it's going to come from, who it's going to come from. So presumably, it's also a revolution needed in Marxist thought. So he knows that Marxism doesn't have the answers. Now, Slavoj Zizek and Friedrich James, these are, again, left-leaning kind of thinkers. They think what's necessary is a cognitive mapping. They don't know what it is. They see it as a kind of analysis of the situation now, where we need to be and how to get there, but they have no idea what it is. What is this cognitive mapping? And Yuval Noah Harari, who is, I guess, more left-leaning, he says that basically the problem is that neither the left nor the right, he says, that what strikes him the most, can actually articulate a serious, meaningful vision of the 21st century, of the future, and how we can actually realize this kind of like cooperation narrative, or how we can get to this better place. So really, the answer we think has to do with ideas. So this is like the power of the idea. Then what is that idea? Okay, we can roll off the cliches. The pen is mightier than the sword. Knowledge is power. You can resist an invading army, but you can't resist an idea who's come. And surely in the age of information, the internet and mass communication, surely ideas should be more powerful. If an idea can emerge that can cut through the porn and the kind of fake news, and if an idea can emerge that can cut through all the rubbish, then surely that can really spread. So we can go on. Power of narratives, it's not a new idea. In the Bible, where there is no vision, the people perish. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. So what is that knowledge? What is that vision? Okay, what we think it is, the answer, and it's a very old idea, the answer is not an idea or new paradigm or new ideology. The idea is something called worldview. Okay, worldview. The German word for worldview is Weltanschauung. Okay, that's a very controversial word because it's really associated with Nazism and the NSDAP. Now, it's really a German word. It's basically from the German philosophic intellectual tradition. And now, in English, there's no word like it because Weltanschauung basically means worldview, but it means the sum total of all knowledge in a person's mind, brain, head, but also within society. Now, in the pluralistic society, there's many worldviews, but that's the basic idea. It's basically your conception of the world. Cosmology, metaphysics, religion, everything, basically. And it's a very ancient idea. It derives from kind of even pre-Renaissance times. One of the kind of medieval pre-Renaissance thinkers, Raymond Lull, kind of resurrected this idea from antiquity. And the idea is basically that the universe, the world, if you really understood it correctly, is an organic unity. And if you really understood what's happening in the world, history, and the universe, if you really knew what's going on, then your knowledge of the world should also be an organic unity. So all the facts should be interconnected, all the bits of knowledge. So, okay, so this idea of worldview, if we go to the next diagram. So basically, worldview or Weltanschauung, okay, all ideas, knowledge, and narratives existing as an interconnected organic unity. So if you talk about paradigm shift, it's not about shifting a scientific paradigm or political paradigm or legalistic, economic, artistic, whatever. In order to really bring about the system change for a country and for the entire world, you need to shift all the paradigms. You need to shift the entire worldview. The idea, it's not just about shifting one idea. You need to shift all the ideas because all the ideas are interconnected. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to explain how we're going to do that. Now, a kind of related ideas talking about the same thing, the anthropologist Anthony Wallace talked about a maze way. Again, the same kind of thing. Now, he's interesting because he described how the maze way gets resynthesized and how a new maze way through this process he calls cultural revitalization can change a society. That's interesting. And a philosopher, one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century, Willard Van Orman Quinn, talked about a knowledge web. Again, the same kind of idea. And if we're talking about cognitive maps, we're talking about the total cognitive map. So you get it. We think the answer has to do with worldview. In order to really start revolutions, you have to change the worldview, and revolutions are based on worldview. We'll explain exactly historically why this is absolutely the case. So we're going to go into a kind of like, now how do I get the diagram off? Okay, stop share. Okay, so worldview. Okay, now we're going to explain why worldview has been so important and why it's absolutely necessary to start revolutionary movements. Okay, so the first thing to examine, first revolutionary movement to examine is the English Civil War. Okay, it's called the Glorious Revolution. We're not taught, I can't remember being taught that in school. It's actually the Glorious Revolution, it's called. It was basically the English Civil War. So Oliver Cromwell, Roundheads versus Cavaliers. Now, if you think about it, there was an existing worldview. Okay, I'll tell you what that existing worldview was. For hundreds of years before the Renaissance, before the English Revolution, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, there was a dominant worldview, and all kind of the historians agree that this worldview held the peace. It kept power. It kept those in power for hundreds of years. That worldview is this. Okay, there was a cosmology and a metaphysics. There was a cosmology of a great chain of being. So the universe is a great chain of being. At the top is God. Okay, it's metaphysical and cosmological. And then below God are the kind of angels and seraphim and kind of like, kind of angelic beings. And then below that, you had the king. Below that, you had the first, so-called first estate, the kind of priests and the pope and the bishops and stuff. And the second estate, the kind of aristocracy and the knights and the kind of landowners. Below that, everyone else. Okay, and then below that great chain of being, you got the animals, and then right at the bottom, you got ants and termites, and below that, you have kind of all kinds of stuff. You see, it's a kind of like a chain of hierarchy. It's basically a chain of hierarchy. Now, associated with this cosmological, metaphysical picture of the great chain of being was this idea of the divine right of kings to rule. So all Europe was basically, people were indoctrinated into that belief. Okay. Now, if you wanted to start a revolution, then basically people would say, but no, hang on, the king has the divine right to rule. And then people might go, but who says that? Well, the Pope says that, the bishop says that, the archbishop says that, the priest says that. So, let's forget the revolution then. So if you think about it, if everyone believed in the divine right of the king to rule and the great chain of being, there is no English Civil War, there is no glorious revolution. Forget it, there's no new model army, there's no Oliver Cromwell, think about it. There's also no revolutions happening in Europe, French Revolution, even the American Revolution, etc. So this great chain of being and divine right of kings to rule was challenged by a new worldview that emerged during the Renaissance. We'll discuss this later on more in depth. And so the king at the time of the Civil War appealed to the great chain of being and the divine right of kings to rule. Look, don't rebel because I'm the king and it's, God says so, but people didn't believe it anymore. So finally, Parliament was able to establish power over, England, Scotland, and what became the United Kingdom. Okay, so worldview was essential, a change in worldview for that revolution to happen. Okay, that's our first exhibit. Now, our second exhibit is a philosopher called, Gottfried Wilhelm Hegel. Okay, Gottfried Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was one of the giants of the German Enlightenment, the German Romantic movement. It's a huge figure. He was the man in terms of, philosophic greatness at that time. The great Bertrand Russell, perhaps the most famous modern kind of British philosopher, began life as a follower of Hegel. Now, he had another very famous follower, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Now, Hegel, who worked in the kind of late 18th century, early 19th century, As a young man, he analyzed all the kind of revolutions before, which meant English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. He said basically, he wrote as a young man, he said that a secret revolution occurred before the physical revolution occurred. Okay, he called it a secret revolution. He called it a spiritual revolution. It had to occur before the physical revolution could occur. He called it a revolution in the zeitgeist. So Hegel's famous for his expression zeitgeist, which means the spirit of the times. And he said basically that people were astonished by the results of the physical revolution, the kind of storming of the gates of the Bastille to overthrow the king, because they were unaware of the secret revolution that preceded the physical revolution. And this secret revolution was absolutely essential. He was really talking about a revolution in the realm of ideas, because basically his idea of zeitgeist and spirit of the age coalesced in minds of philosophers and thinkers into ideas. Okay, so he was talking about revolution in mental conceptions, back to David Harvey. Now, as a young man, he thought that by applying the ideas of Immanuel Kant, who was just before him, a generation before him, a hugely influential philosopher. So in philosophy, people often talk about, the kind of pre-Kantian period and post-Kant. So he's a huge name. Hegel believed that the ideas of Immanuel Kant would lead to a reform of all knowledge, a new worldview that would instigate the revolution to happen in Germany. Okay, now it didn't, and he became very disillusioned with the French Revolution. In fact, these kind of history books record that he didn't meet Napoleon, but he saw Napoleon, and he was very inspired by the French Revolution. But he became very disillusioned, and in his later years, he believed that the Prussian monarchy was the ideal state of political organization. So he became very conservative in his old age. Now the ideas of young Hegel, or the left-wing revolutionary Hegel, they were kind of taken on by a kind of intellectual movement called the Young Hegelians, or the left Hegelians. Now, one of the left Hegelians or young Hegelians you would have heard of this guy. His name's Karl Marx. Okay, so Karl Marx took the ideas. He was a keen follower of Hegel. Okay, he changed. People developed. He critiqued Hegel later on, but he began as a follower of Hegel. Essentially, Marxism is adapted Hegelian worldview, which was designed to start a revolution in Germany. So think about that. Now, Karl Marx changed Hegel's system, made it materialist, took out the religious elements. When Hegel talked about zeitgeist, ghost, the kind of ghost of the times, he was talking about the Holy Geist. So Hegel's philosophy is essentially adapted Hermetic Christianity. Hegel's philosophy is essentially a kind of religion in philosophic language. That's not a controversial statement. Okay, that's basically what most kind of historians believe. Now, Karl Marx obviously is a avowedly atheistic thinker, but his ideas are adapted Hegelian worldview translated into the mid-19th century with adaptations and a lot more political economy. Now, Hegel also did political economy as well, but obviously Karl Marx expanded on that kind of area. Okay, so now think about it. Now think about this. Karl Marx was working away on his own in the British Library, kind of supported by Engels. Okay, just a few miles from here, where I am in London, in lockdown London. And so Karl Marx, this guy working on his own in a library. Okay, 70, 80 years after his death, more than one third of all the people on this planet are living under Marxist regimes. You're talking Soviet Union, China, North African countries, etc. If you include all those capitalist countries, those social democracies who were either influenced by his ideas or had to implement social programs to counteract possible Marxist insurrections, then you can see that Karl Marx's ideas were hugely influential in a very short space of time. Okay, think about that. Okay, so he literally system changed a good part of the world for a very long time, and his ideas are very, very influential still in China. Okay, so Marxism is not dead at all. It's basically a system that has really influenced the world, and basically some people believe, obviously the Chinese Communist Party believe, that Marxist ideas have really been the key to what they've been able to achieve. Okay, so that's very controversial stuff, I know. Not in China, I mean, obviously. Okay, okay, that's our third exhibit. Now we move on to our fourth exhibit. Okay, so worldview, Hegelian worldview, Marxist worldview, kind of English Civil War worldview. It changes things. It basically brings down governments and it basically changes the world, okay, potentially. Okay, our fourth exhibit, which is really controversial, okay. So basically another guy, very influential and also infamous 20th century politician, used to go on and on about worldview, Weltanschauung, used to go on and on about it in his speeches, in his private interactions, in his book called Mein Kampf. Okay, you know who it is now. It's Adolf Hitler. He used to go on and on about Weltanschauung. Okay, so basically he writes the founding of the early Nazi Party. He writes basically when he first met them. He wrote that these in Mein Kampf. He wrote that these 6 or 7 sad losers. No, he didn't say sad losers. He wrote poor devils. These 6 or 7 poor devils. What chance did they have of starting this revolution to rejuvenate Germany? It was hopeless. They were unknown. They were young. They're naive. And how could they possibly hope to start a revolution? But then in the pages of Mein Kampf, he tells you exactly what he's going to do and how he did it. Now, in Mein Kampf, in his speeches, in his personal interactions, in Mein Kampf, paragraph after paragraph, page after page, entire chapters devoted to the subject of worldview, Weltanschauung. Okay, worldview and propaganda, worldview and a kind of party organization, worldview and implementation, worldview and government policy, how the worldview comes into being. So it goes on and on about it and the central importance of worldview. Now, okay, this is, I know this is dangerous, abhorrent stuff. I mean, basically, look, all my kids are mixed race, basically. I'm not blonde and blue-eyed and Aryan. So basically, I mean, the stuff is kind of racist, obviously anti-Semitic. But something went on in what he did that actually succeeded. These 6 or 7 poor devils, okay, just 12 years after the first meeting, okay, they took over a major, modern, industrialized, culturally advanced country, Germany. They took power. 6 or 7 years after that, they were on the verge of world domination. They were on a kind of plan for world domination, and they were well on the way. They took most of Europe by blitzkrieg. They did it very fast. And the shocking thing is they could have won the war. Okay. They were, and that is a controversial statement, but they could have won it. It would have, the roll of the dice went in their favor. They could have won. But think about this. How does Weimar Germany, how do 6 or 7 poor devils come to change the world? Well, Hitler says it. It's worldview. Okay, so look, so that's 4 kind of case studies: English Civil War, Hegel, Karl Marx, the kind of rise of the Nazi Party. And what's central, what's critical is Weltanschauung or worldview. Okay, so that's the kind of, I guess I've made a historical case for worldview. Later on, I'll make it completely relevant for the 21st century. Okay. Now, okay, so is there an analogous situation like the Great Chain of Being? Okay, that the Great Chain of Being stopped all revolution, kept the order for hundreds of years. The kings, the popes, the bishops just basically maintained a hold on the people with this Great Chain of Being and this divine right of kings of rule. Is there an analogous situation today in the world? And the answer is yes. And when you can make it crystal clear, then people see, oh yeah, that is what is necessary to challenge. Okay. And if you don't challenge this analogous situation to the Great Chain of Being, there is no system change, there is no revolution, there is no any kind of change. Okay. Okay, the current worldview, what's wrong with it? What is the current worldview? We're talking about, okay, we're in a kind of multicultural, pluralistic society. There's many worldviews, many religions, Islam, etc. The kind of different religions, different cults, etc. But there is a dominant worldview that's taught in universities, that's taught in schools. And if you deviate too much from this worldview, you're going to get the sack. Okay, basically, there's a dominant worldview that dominates the media, dominates publishing companies. It is materialistic. Okay, it is atheistic, maybe kind of like looking at religion in terms of disdain, or kind of like that's a thing of the past kind of thing, or kind of, oh yeah, it's a cultural phenomenon, but there's no truth in it. Okay, so it kind of dismisses religion, this dominant worldview. It is also neoliberal. It is, especially in Anglo-Saxon countries, where I'm now, UK and America, it is selfish genes Darwinism. Darwinism is very influential. And it's basically the overall model of the universe, which is now being challenged in physics, is that the universe is purposeless and meaningless. Okay, that's the kind of dominant worldview. You can throw in nihilism. Okay. Now, the trouble with this dominant worldview, okay, is that there are certain ideas, okay, certain values, which even atheist thinkers acknowledge come from religion. Now, I won't say it necessarily comes from organized religion or fundamentalist religion. It comes from a kind of hidden religion, which I'll be talking about later on. So for instance, John Gray is an atheist kind of writer, commentator, writes for the New Statesman magazine. So basically, he's not a religious person at all. He's basically left-leaning secular humanist. Okay, he wrote an entire book on the subject. He says the very idea of progress itself comes from prophecies. Before that, there was no notion of progress. Okay. We could also add, in Plato's Republic, the notion of the philosopher king. Okay, what it says is basically the philosopher king leaves the cave of illusions as a mystical experience, experiences the transcendent good. Okay, returns into the cave of illusions, and the job of the philosopher king is to lead society towards the good. So that's another idea of progressive politics. The idea is basically these ideas of progress came from religion. Now we could add ideas of equality comes from religion. Now, some people like Steven Pinker argued, oh yeah, some rationalists sat down and kind of thought about things and kind of thought, yes, equality is the truth, but it doesn't give any examples. There's a much better explanation of where equality comes from. It comes from religion. It comes from notions of everyone being the same in God, that somehow we're made from the same soul. In Christ, there's no Jew, there's no Greek, there's no slave, because in Christ we're all one. And it recurs in the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, you name it, that somehow, yes, on all dimensions, humans are unequal, but on a metaphysical religious level, somehow we're all one. And that's why, anti-slavery movements were spearheaded by Quakers and Methodists. Okay, this was one explanation why that was the case. We could add on ideas of universalism, ideas of even like altruism towards people not genetically dissimilar to yourself. Muhammad teaching that you should look after orphans. In the Judaism, that you should look after foreigners. Don't kill them, don't rape them. Basically, look after them, show them hospitality. These are the kind of teachings of the prophets. Okay, what's really troubling is the notion and new atheists, militant atheists like Douglas Murray, will say that basically he is a militant. He's really promoting atheism, but he's saying basically, oh no, there's something wrong. We're throwing the baby out of the bathwater. He is saying basically, and along with other militant atheists and new atheists, he's saying basically, oh dear, our worldview, our atheist worldview doesn't do the sanctity of human life. He would dearly love what he's promoting to do the sanctity of human life, but it doesn't. Man is a collection of selfish genes as meat machine doesn't mean sanctity of human life. It doesn't mean human dignity. Okay, it doesn't. And he acknowledges that. He's a militant atheist or new atheist. Now, there's an article in the Humanity Journal, which is like a secular humanist, academic journal basically. The title of the article was Human Dignity, the Last Bastion of Liberalism. Okay. And what it was a review of 4 books written recently. This article came out a few years ago. And all these books tried to establish human dignity on grounds using arguments that were not religious, using philosophic arguments, using tortuous logical arguments, using legalistic arguments. And the author had to say, but basically none of these arguments basically came to anything. They just didn't do it. So where does human dignity come from? We're going to go into that. Okay. So it seems that the human dignity, the last bastion of liberalism itself, doesn't have any bastion. Now, the UN preamble on human rights, whereas the inherent dignity, the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundations of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Well, the sad fact of the matter is...
doing a live talk.
Sorry?
Wai Tsang's doing a live talk.
Okay, it's just... I thought it was from next door. Okay, look basically, this preamble, the foundations of freedom, justice, and peace in the world themselves don't have any foundations, and that's the sad fact of the matter, isn't it?
They're pushed to the back now, I think.
So it's a bit of background noise there. Can we quieten that down, or can we?
Susie, can you mute yourself?
We can
Oh,
hear you.
sorry.
Thank you.
It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of, it's distracting. Okay. So basically, that's a problem. So sanctity of human life, human dignity, the modern worldview doesn't do it. So if the foundations of freedom, justice, and peace in the world don't exist anymore, then we basically have the situation we have in the world right now. Okay. The problem is worse than that, because basically what the modern worldview does support, you think about it, what the modern worldview does support is exactly the dominant political culture of the 21st century. You think about it. Okay, what is it? Neoliberalism. There's this philosophy called Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is hugely influential in the US Republican Party. She's huge in, she started a few years ago, but she's huge in Silicon Valley. Now her philosophy is called objectivism. And basically her idea is absolute selfishness is the ultimate virtue. That sounds insane, doesn't it? But she writes books, films that argue that absolute selfishness is the only virtue, basically, based on what we know about the world and the universe and science. Okay, now she actually said that basically the ideal context for practicing her philosophy is laissez-faire capitalism. Okay. Now, Richard Dawkins, the kind of high priest of selfish genes Darwinism, okay, he said in an interview a few years back, okay, Richard Dawkins is one of the chief militant atheists, okay, Richard Dawkins. Now he said in an interview in the Oxford Union, he said he is a passionate anti-Darwinist. Okay, I'm going to repeat that because you thought you heard me wrong, okay. Richard Dawkins said he's a passionate anti-Darwinist when it comes to living our lives and organizing our societies. Okay, he talks about the nastiness of the selfish gene. He talks about basically that the selfish genes leads to a fat right world, he joked. It leads to, well, essentially a neoliberal world. Okay, that's Richard Dawkins. So you think about it, selfish genes is not incompatible with neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is totally exactly what Ayn Rand is saying, is basically, like the truth, the perfect context for what she's saying. A US Library of Congress study showed that basically Ayn Rand's books, her book Atlas Shrugged, according to a kind of US Library of Congress study, is the second most influential book in America after the Bible. You think about that. Huge in the Republican Party. Donald Trump is her biggest fan. And Donald Trump actually lived the Ayn Rand superhero. One of her books, Fountainhead, basically the guy builds skyscrapers, for Christ's sake. Okay, what does Donald Trump do? He builds skyscrapers. So you see, these ideas are really influential, but they're dominant in the world. But the sad fact of the matter is, you think absolute selfishness is a virtue, fine. Okay, what I believe is that a society where everyone believes that absolute selfishness is the ultimate virtue doesn't have a future. Okay, that's what I believe. The simple fact of the matter is, Ayn Rand's ideas, neoliberalism, selfish genes, basically all these kind of ideas that are dominating the world, they are supported by the current worldview. So the sad fact of the matter is, basically, her philosophy is called objectivism. If we are truly objective about things, then basically her philosophy makes total sense. Ayn Rand supporters I meet in my talks, in personal interactions, basically they're not stupid people. They've reasoned their way to absolute selfishness as a virtue. It goes a bit further. It's not just about that. Now, some people might be thinking, oh, Wai, what you're bitching about, your neoliberalism, sure. I mean, you got your political gripes and stuff. You think, absolute selfishness isn't so cool, but so what? The world ticks along. There's another consequence to the current worldview, and it has to do with Darwinism and selfish genes. Now, George Price was the theorist who originally formulated the mathematics of selfish genes and the theory of kin selection. So basically, he came just after World War II. William Hamilton built on his work, and Richard Dawkins is a communicator of basically the work of George Price and William Hamilton. George Price showed that the mathematics of altruism, basically kin selection, we are kind to people because we're hardwired to be kind because we're really being kind to our own genes. It's really kindness to our own kin. And if you're kind to people genetically dissimilar to ourselves, it's a kind of misfiring of our brain circuits. George Price showed that the mathematics of kin selection, if you basically sacrifice yourself and basically for your own kin, your own genes, and you promote your own genes into the next generation. But he showed that the mathematics of kin selection, helping your own kin, is also the mathematics of genocide. By killing people who are not genetically similar to yourself, you also promote your own genes. Now, I'm not talking speculating hypothetically the ideas of Darwin may lead to genocidal political ideologies, because you know for a fact that the first wave of Darwinism in the 19th century, social Darwinism, Herbert Spencer, his cousin, and Francis Galton, eugenics, became racial hygiene in Germany, became this doctrine called theozoology from this theorist called Georg Lance von Liebenfels. Okay, theozoology kind of adapted those ideas. Young Hitler was a great fan of Georg Lance von Liebenfels. Georg Lance von Liebenfels had a magazine called Ostara, and the people living with Hitler in the Doss house he was living in before World War I and he joined the army, said he had the complete works of Georg Lance von Liebenfels. Historians now agree that basically Hitler did meet Georg Lance von Liebenfels, because in interviews given actually before World War II, Georg Lance von Liebenfels said things he could only have known if he met Hitler, like where he bought the magazine and newsstand in Vienna. But there's no way. So there's lots of things like that people suppose makes the historians think that yes, they did meet. Okay, but anyway, all the things that became Nazi ideology, the forced deportations, the gas chambers, the mass exterminations, all the kind of like racial hygiene exterminations, were in the pages of Stara. That's been observed by historians. Now, the simple fact of the matter is, it's not just neoliberalism, selfishness. Okay, a bit of selfishness. You know, I'm pretty selfish sometimes. Absolute selfishness is the problem. Okay, neoliberalism. That's not just the problem. Okay, so many Conservative Party people might think, you know, forget, no, we are neoliberals. We know we like our Ayn Rand. It's not, the problem is not just that. The problem is genocidal ideology. You don't just reason your way to Ayn Rand absolute selfishness. You also reason your way to genocide. Now, the Waffen-SS followers Hitler, they kind of went to their graves thinking Hitler was right. Okay, they would have thought, oh yeah, we lost the war, that was too bad, you know, we thought we were going to win. Denazification was a drag, but they thought Hitler was right, essentially. Okay, but given their worldview, given their scientific worldview, that, you know, even before the work of George Price, what their worldview was perfectly consistent with the science at that time. Do you get it? So basically, the problem with today is basically not to kind of like replace an ideology or to basically, you know, have a new manifesto or a new social movement. If you don't challenge the existing worldview, it comes to nothing. In exactly the same way as the divine right of kings kind of held power, you replace one set of neoliberal Ayn Rand, you know, genocidal maniacs. Basically, a generation later, it will return unless you replace the worldview. Okay, that's the essence of the problem with the existing worldview. Okay, so oh gosh, time flies when you're talking about these kind of things. I mean, really seriously. I mean, did I tell you a funny story? I mean, you know, when I'm by myself, I rant and talk about like this to the walls. You know, so it's much better. I'm talking to some live people. This is great. But what we discussed with the organizers, basically, we're going to take some questions. Okay, so take some questions, and then any points to clarify or any objections, and then we'll roll along. So any questions at this point? And then we'll show you what the worldview is that's going to challenge the existing worldview. Okay. So who's going to... So Sam, how does this work? I mean, how do I take questions?
So you can either type them in the chat, guys, or just unmute yourself.
Okay, so any questions? Well, has anyone raised their hands?
Yeah, yes, please, Wai.
Oh, where are you? I can't see you. I can't see you. Who's that?
That's Nicholas.
Oh, I can't see you. Where are you? Where are you? Hang on. Nicholas. Okay, view. Gallery view. Nicholas. Oh, Nicholas Mitchell. Okay, there you go. Okay. Okay, you're unmuted. Oh, how you go? Asked to unmute. What do I do? What do I do? We should rehearse this. I mean, can you speak up?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Okay, great. I can hear you.
Yeah, so this is very, very much along my own line of thinking. So just 7 years ago, I started asking questions. What's the gender conflict? What's the neoliberalism? And it's exactly as you said, when you create a worldview or narrative, overriding narrative that appeals to our base instincts, I suppose, or our childlike desires, and then you look forward, say, 40 years from then, and then you look at the wealth distribution and how that's gone, and it does seem to be an oh dear kind of sense of urgency, and that if we keep like you say, it's going right back to the way in which we think, which is inspired by the worldview and a narrative that we subscribe to. So my question is, looking at how to rapidly change a worldview, I wondered what your thoughts were on the renaissance of psychedelics as a means to inspire a change of thought, of revelation from the inside out, if that makes any sense.
It's funny, Nicholas. It's funny. That's exactly what we're going to talk about in the next section, the Renaissance. Funny. I mean, I was going to gauge how many psychedelic people are. There is psychedelic material I've prepared, but I was going to gauge how many psychedelic people are. There's exactly what we're going to talk about next. So I'm going to ask you a question for the next section of the talk. Okay. Okay. So any other questions about the previous, or Tom and Tom Sharon? Yeah.
So I just wondered what you see, if you see any, as a correlation with worldview and consciousness. So for me, they're linked. And I would say if you go up a level of consciousness, your worldview changes. Do you see a correlation?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, the worldview that came out in the Renaissance, which we'll talk about in a minute, was exactly about consciousness alteration. Absolutely. It's not just about intellectual thoughts. It really is about. It's not just about the happiness of the people, well-being, which is obviously really important. The worldview that emerged during the Renaissance was a kind of religious worldview. It was a mystical worldview. They weren't just talking about being happy and nice and well-organized society. Okay, I'll go into this later on in the talk. They were talking about unity with Godhead. I kind of given away some of the surprise later on. Okay, so there's the talk we came to in Bristol was, what I talk about. There's a worldview that emerged during the Renaissance. There's key books. This is not speculation. This is basically, we'll examine those books in the next section. Basically, it was all about a shift in consciousness. Yes, it was about revolution. Yes, it was about overthrowing kings and shaping society and technology and science. But fundamentally, it was about a shift in consciousness. It was about union with the state of consciousness called being one with God. Okay. Okay. So you came to the talk in last year, so you know exactly what the next section is going to be. So I kind of destroyed the suspense there, okay, and the surprise. Okay. It doesn't matter. Most you know me anyway, so kind of what's going to come. So any other questions? One more question, then we'll kind of move on.
Yeah, I can ask a question if I may.
Who's that? Nicholas again. So who's that? Who's asking a question?
This is me, Linus. I don't know if anyone can see me.
Yeah, I see you.
So I just want to see if I'm understanding the story right. So you've talked about different ideologies, and you've mentioned like Marxism, and you've mentioned Hegel and idealism, and then you talked about Ayn Rand's libertarianism and neoliberalism, and you've sort of said, okay, so all of these things have like a materialist component, and they're devoid of like some sort of spiritual thoughts that is kind of depriving modern society of a certain way of living. So do you see other countries that are kind of maybe more theocratic, that they have this thing that we're lacking?
Okay, good question. Actually, that's a really good question. Now, basically, I think the process of secularization and the kind of spiritual darkness is something that's happened the world over. I know people think, oh, but India, isn't that spiritualized? You've got Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. But well, no, it's actually a very superstitious country, but it's not necessarily spiritual. Do you know what I'm saying? Okay. So I think there are pockets in the world, but you know, when I was young, I thought Tibet was really spiritual, but then you read about history, it wasn't. It's like, you know, it's almost like we recognize the corruption of the Catholic Church and the kind of Protestant Church over here, the kind of stuff. But same kind of, you know, child molestation, child abuse happened in the Tibetan, you know, ecclesiastical hierarchy, and Dalai Lama acknowledges this. So the same kind of abuses that occurred, and the kind of spiritual darkness that we had in the West that we know about also occurred in these, you know, so-called more spiritualized countries. So Tibet wasn't Shangri-La after, you know, the Communist Party invaded, and India is not this kind of like a, you know, enlightened place where everyone's kind of like kind of having mystical experiences. Well, actually, some of them are. I mean, I know, but that's more the psychedelic crowd. Okay, so that's something else. Okay, which that's another talk. So there are people smoking loads of charas. Okay, so and they do have these full-blown mystical experiences. But generally, you know, what we have in Hinduism is kind of this Hindu nationalist thing, and that's a good antithesis of what Hinduism was originally about. So I see basically there are pockets, maybe indigenous religion, maybe some new age sects, some new age gurus, little pockets, but the world over, I see the kind of world, the process of secularization has been a kind of world process. And it's because this force of, you know, kind of modern industrialized societies and scientific rationalism has been really, really powerful. So I see a kind of spiritual darkness the world over, waiting for some kind of reawakening of the ancient truths. That's where I see it, really. Okay, you know, where I used to work, St. James's Church, and I have an ex-co-worker here somewhere. Yes, I see you, Sarah. It was a real hotbed of New Age activity, and we learn about the New Age. You think it's, oh, this is so spiritual and so enlightened and stuff, but you've learned what's behind it. It's all money, money, money. Really, I know the scene. So that my view of, you might call me a cynic, but I think you know, human nature is quite, in terms of certain base instincts, like Nicholas was referring to earlier, is quite powerful, and these religious institutions get subverted, and I think it's happened the world over. So sorry, that's what I think. Okay, Linus. Okay, I think, do you want any desperate questions or any anyone bursting ask a question? Then we'll move on to explain what is that worldview that's going to challenge the existing one. Okay, what is it? Okay, so I'll move on then. Okay, I'll move on. So what is that kind of, what is the answer? No, okay, I've given away the secret now. I've kind of like spoiled the surprise. Now this is where it's easy, because the same worldview that's, you know, created the revolutions we talked about, English Civil War, American, French revolutions, and even the Nazi Party and Marxism, they have a lineage from the Renaissance. Okay, so ideas from the Renaissance emerged that basically caused these revolutions to happen. And that sounds really naff, doesn't it? So you're saying, Wai, that a bit of Aristotle, a bit of you know, pagan architecture, a bit of, you know, pagan poetry and philosophy is going to save the world and change the planet. Okay, yeah, but a bit more Aristotle and things would be fine. A bit more Plato would be fine. No, like, there is a secret behind the Renaissance. There is a secret of the Renaissance men. There is a forbidden truth in the Renaissance. Okay, now this sounds like conspiracy theory, doesn't it? No, it's fact. It's absolute fact. And I'm going to show you the absolute texts and the historical, you know, kind of like factoids to show you that this hidden truth has been suppressed. It's banned, you know, heretics burned, books burned, literally burned and killed. Okay, and the situation is complicated by the fact, not only do the people who opposed this secret killed its adherents and burned the books which espoused the secret, it's complicated by the fact that the books which describe the secret tell you not to divulge the secret to, you know, common folks. So you think about it, basically, that's why the secret is so secret, okay? Why it's been, you know, suppressed and held back by the people who believe it. But we're going to blow it apart because we think this is the answer to basically starting revolutionary movements, okay? And it's behind all the revolutionary movements I talked about, plus all the revolutions in Islam and China, which are, that's for another talk. Actually, watch the video Revolutionary Movements and how to start one from 10 years ago. I talk about it. Okay, so okay, look, we're going to go into what is the Renaissance. Okay, So Wai, you say there's this big secret. Can you substantiate that? I mean, this sounds a bit like conspiracy theory. Okay, the answer you're talking about is a secret, is it? Well, that's no good, is it? You need to make it explicit. It's no good to have this secret answer that no one knows about. And can you substantiate what you're saying? Well, I can, yeah. Okay, look, everyone see this diagram? You can see this diagram, can't you? Okay. Okay, so without a doubt, the modern world came from the Renaissance. No Renaissance, no Enlightenment, no modern world. Okay, before that was feudal monarchy, basically. Okay, there was a pre-Renaissance. There was books from Cordoba and Toledo. These were Muslim, cities in southern Spain that were taken over, and it had a flood of ancient literature entered into Europe. Okay, this is a few hundred years before it. That's a pre-Renaissance. But where it really got going was in Italy. It was in Florence. Okay, the Renaissance really got going. But what happened? We need to understand what happened, because we think it holds the key to solving the problems of this world. Okay. So okay, this big secret. Okay, so basically, I can point you to facts and actual books. Okay, and the great thing is that all these books, like Plato's Republic, Corpus Hermeticum, the Translated Bible, Oration on the Dignity of Man, these 4 books, you can actually just download them. So it's a big secret. You just type this title in PDF, you get it. Okay, so these books are very important. These are the foundations of the modern world. But you just type in internet the title PDF, and you get copies. You get full PDF copies. Okay. Now, okay, what is this big secret? Okay, the big secret behind the Renaissance, there's a hidden religion, and they called it the Prisca Theologia, or the kind of like the primal, original, uncorrupted religion. Now, okay, the Medici, okay, all the people around that time, the Renaissance, they believed that they knew about the existence of a book called Corpus Hermeticum. Can you see in the diagram, Corpus Hermeticum? And they knew about its existence, and they believed that the Corpus Hermeticum came from ancient Egypt, and they believed that it contained the most precise and uncorrupted rendition, or kind of exposition of the Prisca Theologia. Now, just before the Renaissance got going, okay, basically the Medici, who were the financiers, the godfathers of the Renaissance, they were bankers. They bankrolled the Renaissance. They funded Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Okay, basically, they finally, one of the agents of the Medici found a copy of the Corpus Hermeticum in a monastery in what's now Bulgaria, which was then Byzantium. Okay. Now, finally, they got a copy of the Corpus Hermeticum, and the Medici said to Marsilio Ficino, who is really the epicenter, he was the translator of all the ancient works into Latin. So he's like he is the epicenter of the Renaissance. They said to him, look, stop work on everything you're doing, stop the Plato, Aristotle, we don't care. We don't, like, Corpus Hermeticum, translate it now. Okay, basically, we got the big secret now in this book, Corpus Hermeticum. The knowledge contained in it is absolutely explosive. Okay, download it, read it, you see what I mean. You'll see the secret of the Renaissance, man. You'll see the origins of science right in those pages, chapter 13, you will see the origins of empiricism. Okay, this book is seriously banned, and basically it's seriously heretical, and you see why it's dangerously heretical. I'll explain what those beliefs were. Okay, we just move along. Another book which entered into the Italian Renaissance, which is really important, most important political book ever written, Plato's Republic. Okay, you get words like democracy, tyranny, oligarchy, it all comes from Plato's Republic. So it's basically a really influential political book. And that it was very influential. It talked about, the kind of like a rule by a philosophic elite, by the philosopher king I talked about earlier, leaves the cave of illusions, has a mystical experience, and leads society towards the good. And obviously, there is the translated Bible. So finally, people read the Bible, and there's all the stuff that the Catholic Church banned and didn't let you read. And so it's all there in Common and High German, in English now. Okay, King James Bible, etc., in French. So suddenly, the Bible was translated from Latin that no one could read apart from kind of priests and academics into the common vernacular. Okay, I can tell you basically all these books. And then, okay, the last book I should say, okay, the Oration on the Dignity of Man is perhaps the most important book, because it's called the Manifesto of the Renaissance. It's called the Manifesto of Renaissance Humanism. So, okay, Pica della Mirandola is the other genius, the intellectual genius of the Renaissance. Marsilio Ficino, the translating genius. Pica della Mirandola was the other genius. He died young, but he wrote the Oration on the Dignity of Man. He was actually assassinated. He was killed, okay, because his body was exhumed in 2007, and his body was saturated with arsenic. So he was assassinated, okay, we know that. We discovered that quite recently. He wrote a book called The Oration on the Dignity of Man, the Manifesto of the Renaissance. And I'll tell you what it is. Download it and read it. It's basically a religious work. He is synthesizing essentially corpus hermeticum and various aspects of the Bible. Okay, so what is it about? It is about, okay, it's about mysticism, magic, and mythology. Okay, that sounds wacky, doesn't it? That sounds very New Age. You're going to go off on a New Age tangent. Well, we're going to show in the next talk, basically all these things, mysticism, mythology, magic, they have a really scientific explanation that science actually came from Renaissance ideas of the magus and what they conceived as magic. Okay, so science and technology came from notions of the Renaissance magus. So these sound really kind of quite, kind of New Age and a bit namby-pamby, but really they were the concepts which really propelled the Renaissance. Now, okay, the Bible, obviously the Bible is a great big book, okay, but there's a very important book in the Bible called the St. John Gospel. Okay, it's the most mystical book of the Bible. But no, really, seriously, there's no comparison. You know, if you read the Bible, the St. John Gospel is really mystical, contains all the mystical stuff. It's the only gospel where Jesus claims to be God. It is, in terms of metaphysics, it's where the metaphysical, cosmological kind of, mystical actions going on. Now, the interesting thing is, both Marsilio Ficino and later Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, they thought that the St. John Gospel and the Corpus Hermeticum were written by the same person. And when you read both, you see the deep parallels between the two. Okay. Now, okay, the St. John Gospel, I read in the book about power in this world, is also, I've read, is the favorite gospel of the Freemasons. Okay, we're talking about Freemasons quite a lot in a minute, the origins of Freemasonry and the original meaning of Freemasonry. And the Freemason Lodge and the headquarters in Covent Garden, you see copies of the Corpus Hermeticum. You go to any Freemason library, you see all kinds of Corpus Hermeticums, leather-bound, paperback, recent translations, ancient translations, human skin-bound. No, I'm kidding, I'm joking. You see all kinds of Corpus Hermeticums in Freemason libraries. You read Corpus Hermeticum, then it's really essentially about what Freemasons are about, okay? So if you want to know the secret behind Freemasonry, read the Corpus Hermeticum. Okay, so look, this just Prisca Theologia really was essential for understanding the Renaissance. And the Prisca Theologia really does correspond to the mystical parts of the Bible. And in Plato's Republic, we talk about there's this mystical element of the philosopher king having a mystical experience, leaving the cave of illusions. We talked about it earlier. Now, the Oration on the Dignity of Man is a synthesis of all these ideas. So it's essentially a synthesis of mysticism, this idea of being one with God. Okay, so it actually quotes Psalm 82:6 that you're all gods. That actually Jesus quotes in St. John Gospel, chapter 10, around line 26, where he's about to be stoned to death. And he says, why did you stone me to death? Because you claim to be God. You're a mere man, claim to be God. But then he quotes Psalm 82:6, but it's not written in your law, Psalm 82:6, that you're all gods. Okay, so Pico de Mirandola also quotes that in Oration on the Dignity of Man. So you have this mystical idea, but then he talks at length about magic. Okay, he goes at length to explain what is the meaning of magic, how it's misunderstood. Okay, he's talking about white magic, natural magic. What he's really talking about is technology, because in a line in Oration on Dignity of Man, he says basically that, okay, quote, when thoroughly examined, magic proves to be nothing more than the highest realization of natural philosophy, i.e. science. Now that sounds like such a mundane explanation. There's a highly mysterious dimension to magic as well, but there's a very practical dimension that gave rise to science and technology. You read Corpus Hermeticum in chapter 13, you can see directly where Francis Bacon, the father of modern science, where his empiricism comes from. Well, he writes in chapter 13, it's all about sense and understanding, that you can't understand without sensing the primary importance of the interplay of the two. So empiricism, you measure the world and understand it. And it says that sense and understanding are one, they're intertwined. And in the last lines, it says that it is the organ and the implementation of the will of God. So you see, when people like Francis Bacon read this kind of stuff, it's obvious, that basically he derives his ideas of empiricism from the Corpus Hermeticum. And people like John Dee and Francis Bacon did read the Corpus Hermeticum and all this kind of stuff, Pico de Mirandola. John Dee, who was Francis Bacon's teacher and mentor, had a complete works of Marsilio Ficino and Pico de Mirandola in his library. So these were the ideas circulating in the minds of these of the luminaries of the English Renaissance. Okay, so we kind of like we're saying basically all these books that you can access, you can read the pages, contains, they're all about magic, mysticism, and mythology and prophecy. That's what they're about. Okay. Oh gosh, I can't believe I've been talking for an hour. My God. Okay, we're gonna basically. This is a series of free talks. I'm just not sure about the kind of attention spans of people in a kind of like a Zoom talk. Basically, I'm gonna kind of go into the next phase where I'm gonna just explain how these ideas then got into those revolutionary movements we talked about. Now, the English Civil War, French Revolution, American Revolution, the Nazi Party, and Marxism. Okay, this is a surprise to many people, but they all contain this esoteric dimension, even Marxism, because it derives from Hegel. Okay. Now, the funny thing is, Hegel believed he was God. That's not a controversial thing to say. You read kind of introductory books about philosophy, they'll tell you Hegel believed he was God. That sounds wacky, but you got to see it in the context of what we're talking about here. Hegel grew up in Stuttgart, Württemberg, which is southern Germany. And Stuttgart was a hotbed of what's called Hermetic Christianity, where these ideas of man and God being one and the same were quite, they're quite current. I'm not saying that everyone believed in these ideas, but Hegel absorbed these ideas. Okay. I mean, interestingly, we can also understand why this esotericism was so big in Bavaria and Munich, and why the Nazi Party came out of the Tula Society, which is essentially a mystical society. And why these kind of like two parts of Germany are, on the southernmost edge, and kind of Munich, Bavaria, Stuttgart, Württemberg. It's not a coincidence. It's simply the fact that they're next door to Italy. So these ideas tended to penetrate more southern Germany than the rest of Germany, just because of geographical proximity. But then why did Francis Bacon and John Dee come to know these ideas? It's simply because people like Giordano Bruno, the great Giordano Bruno, traveled to England by ship. And basically, the historian Francis Yates believes that they most likely met in England. So you see this transmission of ideas going on. Okay. So look, these ideas from Renaissance, we'll go to our next diagram now. We'll go to our next diagram, which is this. Okay, the next diagram is basically, so look, this is what we talked about: mysticism, magi, and magic, magus, and all this kind of stuff, mythology. In the next talk, we're going to show the total unification of science with all these ideas. The most okay, I'm just going to do a plug for the next talk of this series, which hopefully we'll do next Tuesday. Okay, it is this. The next talk is going to basically show the perfect synthesis of religion and science. Look, all through the 20th century, 19th century, there's always been parallels between science and religion. There's been little fragments of parallels between science and religion. What has happened now, literally in the past 5-10 years, all the pieces of the scientific jigsaw puzzle have come together in such a way they can put together the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in such a way, all these purely, absolutely scientific ideas, to construct a picture which is identical to the picture of the universe and metaphysical outlook that's presented in the Renaissance. And we're going to explain this in the next talk. Okay, so this is going to be kind of like this talk here is like the implications of that unification between science and religion, the political implications. And we'll do the science and the religion unification in the next talk. Okay, so in our next diagram, we're going to, okay, this is absolute monstrosity of the diagram. Okay, but can you see, look, the first diagram of the Renaissance you saw, that diagram, can you see it is basically a box in this diagram, can you see? So everyone can see that diagram. So what we talked about just now, Plato's Republic, Corpus Mesicum, translated Bible. Now, okay, this diagram never makes everyone happy, because I'm tempted to show the lineage of all political ideas stemming from the Renaissance. And it's kind of obvious, isn't it, that basically, all these political ideologies we have now, they did derive from the Renaissance, because without the Renaissance, they wouldn't have happened. We're just putting in some arrows of the main protagonists here. So, take a screenshot, look at it at length. So look, Italian Renaissance became the English Renaissance. There's John Dee, there's Francis Bacon, became the German Renaissance, became the German Enlightenment. There's Hegel, and there's Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, communism, the current left wing. There's Hitler over there, Hitler and Guido von List and all these kind of people. And so look, the idea here is basically there is a chain of transmission of ideas, okay? But for our purposes, the important thing is that these mystical ideas relating to you know, this Prisca Theologia, this esoteric religion, was also transmitted to all these revolutions, which I need to explain now. So we're going to complete our history lesson now, just by going through all these revolutions and showing that the English Civil War, kind of French Revolution, the kind of American Revolution, Nazi Party, and Marxism, they all contain this mystical core. Okay, this sounds surprising because Marxism is kind of like expressly atheistic, but I'll show you it is indeed the case. That there is a mystical core, a kind of a religious core based on a corpus hermeticum, and it's contained in all these revolutionary movements. If you combine that idea with the idea that this mystical core can be resurrected completely in the 21st century, and in the third talk, I will show why this mystical ideas of a Renaissance magus, and ideas of prophecies and mythology is systematic to why these revolutions and these system changes were successful. Okay. So when you take these together, that is the kind of like the shape of the forest. And I'm kind of going through the trees. So that is what I think is the overall answer. You see, it's a powerful answer. It's a powerful historical precedent kind of thing. It's a kind of like a up-to-date 21st century kind of thing. And it's also in terms of nuts and bolts, the dynamics. It kind of alters many of the questions of political theorists of why revolutions succeed and why they're not succeeding now. Okay, so we're just going to round off this, gosh, time flies. Just round off this quite short first part of a series of presentations, just by going through the transmission of these ideas into these revolutions. Okay, look, essentially, Freemasonry was behind the English Civil War. It was behind the French Revolution. It was behind the American Revolution. Basically, all the generals, the instigators, the commanders. Generally, they were mainly Freemasons. So now I've got to explain what is Freemasonry. Okay, what is Freemasonry? Okay, so basically you have stone workers, people working stone, making cathedrals in Europe. Why does it have to do with, why should that be associated with esoteric religion, with the Prisca Theologia? Why is this connection between mysticism and stone workers? Why? Freemasonry. Okay, two reasons. Okay, two reasons. Historically, okay, going back in antiquity, okay, you have this thing, a big idea in Freemasonry called building the Temple of Solomon. Okay. Now, the first and second temples in Jerusalem, Israel, okay, Israelites, okay. Okay, the trouble was this, okay, there was holy ground, and only the high priests and the initiates were allowed to enter the holy ground. Okay, so basically, the problem is, how do you build a temple then, if only high priests and initiates, mystical initiates, were allowed to enter the holy ground? Or was you gonna, you kind of like you spoil it? Okay, the solution is this: you basically make the builders, the masons, into mystical initiates. That's an easy solution, isn't it? Okay, that's the one reason why historically there's been this connection with masonry, and Freemasons believe that this idea goes way back to ancient Egypt and the pyramids. Okay, now the second reason is more kind of prosaic. It's more kind of like, you know, kind of matter of fact. In the medieval times, basically, Masons were elite workers. They were above average intelligence. They could read. They were sophisticated. They were, you know, your intelligentsia. They were your elites, and they were allowed to travel all over Europe to build these cathedrals and big churches. Okay. Now, because they were more sophisticated, they could read. They were looking for a more sophisticated understanding of God than the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church could give, and they found it in the Corpus Hermeticum, in the writings of Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola, like John Dee, like Francis Bacon, who's closely associated with Freemasonry. So in a sense, one way of looking at Freemasonry, it is a religion, and it is basically, it is esoteric religion. It's taken this Prisca Theologia, this hidden religion, and it's taken it underground. And this is why there's heavy connection between Freemasonry and mystical Islam. That's why the Aga Khan is a Freemason, and why his dad's a Freemason. Why is this close connection to the Knights Templars and the Ismailis, the Nazari? Because there's this mystical bond between the two. Okay, so Freemasonry heavily influenced by Islam and vice versa. Okay, so the English Civil War, the overall commander of the parliamentary forces was a guy called Thomas Fairfax, and the Fairfaxes were one of the most prominent Freemason families for many generations in the 17th, 18th, early 19th century. Okay, Oliver Cromwell, we don't know. He was a Puritan. Okay, he was a Puritan, and but what he was an apocalyptic Puritan. So this idea of prophecies and mythic archetypes, the new model army. Okay, they believed the new model army. Believed that they were all Puritans. They all believed that they were hastening the coming of Christ. They weren't fighting just to establish Parliament. In their letters, in their sermons given to the new model army, it's clear that what they believed was that they were going to create the millennial kingdom through their fighting. Okay. So the English Civil War is essentially an apocalyptic movement influenced by mystical Freemasons. Now, was Oliver Cromwell a Freemason? Wasn't he? It's the speculation we don't know, basically. It's one of those things we don't know. But he was. But we know that most of his generals were. That he basically was very sympathetic to Freemasonry.
I didn't really. He seemed very just kind of matter of fact.
Is that a question, or is that just okay? Background noise. Okay.
Ashley, can you mute your mic, please?
Oh, also, can we what?
Ashley, there. Okay, she did it. It's fine.
Okay. Look. Okay. English Civil War, the Fairfaxes. Now, no. The Freemason connection goes to the American Revolution, because George Washington's brother married into the Fairfax family. So this is not conspiracy theory. This is a matter of historical record. Okay. George Washington himself was introduced into Virginian society as a young man through the Fairfaxes, who were like aristocratic. Okay. So basically, and George Washington obviously is a Freemason. And we see these connections going all over the place. And the French Revolution, okay, the famous interaction of Count Lafayette joined the American rebellion against the English king, and vice versa. Benjamin Franklin was the guy who initiated Voltaire into Freemasonry. So see, the French Civil War led by kind of Freemason generals, the American Revolution led by people, you know, the signers of the Declaration of Independence, mainly Freemasons. Most of the generals that led the kind of the rebellion in the American rebel army were Freemasons. Okay, so basically, these revolutions were really driven by this kind of these esoteric notions that derive from the Renaissance. Okay, now so that's the kind of like the kind of Enlightenment revolutions. Now, what about Marxism? Now, Marxism. Okay, it's derived from the kind of philosophy of Hegel. Now, basically, Hegel is adapted Hermetic Christianity. That's what it is. And essentially what Marx did, he basically adapted all the ideas of Hegel. Okay, made him materialist. Okay, took away the idealism. Took away. Okay, now Hegel believed in this kind of like guiding spirit of world history. And what Karl Marx had to do was replace it with dialectic materialism. He kind of promoted this idea that his ideas were scientific, inevitably leading to the same kind of conclusion of this kind of workers' paradise that Hegel saw as a kind of religious mystical process, the guiding hand of God. Now, in Marxist kind of thinking, there is basically in the communist anthem, the Internationale, it goes, okay, this is our last and final struggle, and then there will be no more struggles and all will be peace. That's pretty apocalyptic, isn't it? So we have this, this idea that basically Marxism basically inherited ideas of Hegel, who basically took these ideas from the prophetic tradition of Christianity. So the 4 ages of Karl Marx, he took directly from the Book of Daniel, from works of Hegel. You know, primitive communism, kind of primitive modes of kind of feudal capitalism, then to this kind of stage, the 4th stage of kind of modern or later communism. So basically, Marx's ideology is essentially adapted esoteric apocalyptic Christian theology, and that's essentially what it is. And a Nazi party, the same idea, instead of a class war, kind of war between good and evil, the kind of proletariat versus the kind of like the owners of capital. Nazism replaced class war with race war for a millennial Reich, a 1,000-year reign of, well, kind of Hitler and his progeny. That comes straight from the Bible, 1,000-year reign of Christ from the prophecies. Do you see what's happening? And there's a very good book, The Millennial Reich, which describes the early lectures of the early kind of meetings. The speeches of Hitler were purely apocalyptic. This was an apocalyptic struggle between the Aryans and the kind of arch enemy, the Jews, for this kind of millennial Reich. So we have this mystical dimension from this, the early Nazi party was basically derived from this thing called the Tula Society based in Munich. there was a German mystic called Guido von List. And all over the German-speaking world, there were List societies all over the German-speaking world. He died in 1919, and the Bavarian branch of the List Society basically recalled itself the Tula Society. Guido von List taught all these kind of corpus mescum stuff. Everyone's God and stuff, and that somehow we can be one with God. Taught magic, taught mysticism, taught mythology. That's what he taught. Now, these 6 or 7 poor devils I mentioned that Hitler describes in Mein Kampf, they weren't just young people, kind of like people he thought wouldn't succeed in this great revolution. They were also members of the Tula Society. And it's been kind of written by historians that the kind of membership list of the early Nazi party read like a who's who of the Tula Society, and vice versa. The membership list of the Tula Society, it was like the early Nazi party and the Tula Society were one and the same. Do you get it? Throwing Hitler. So mystical secret societies, apocalyptic ideology, and you have these revolutions. Okay. So that is kind of like my God, time does fly when you talk about interesting ideas. Look, we're gonna just wrap up this first talk because I'm just not sure about the attention spans of people in a setting like that. Okay, not many people logging off, which is great. Okay, this is great. Okay, I'm just not sure about the attention spans of people. I mean, my live talks go on for hours. Literally, I talk for 2-3 hours, and people just, really just transfixed. So I'm not sure about how people can hold the attention in a kind of like. So I'm basically just experimenting. So I'm gonna wrap up this talk, and then we'll take questions. Okay, so essentially, the answer is basically you need a system change. You need to start this revolution. The answer comes from history. Then we analyze all these revolutions. There's something about what's in them, and it comes from Renaissance. And it's basically, if you can resurrect these key truths, these esoteric truths from the Renaissance, then you revive those kind of like values: equality, liberty, fraternity, human dignity, sanctity of human life, equality, progress, that really gave rise to the modern world, and that enabled civilization. So there you have something to challenge neoliberalism, challenge the existing assumptions of modern society. So this is not a history lesson, because yes, it is a history lesson, but it's basically, we can extrapolate from history into the 21st century if we can fully revive this esoteric Prisca Theologia for the 21st century. And then in the third talk, we'll describe systematically why it is that these ideas really do propel these social movements to success. Okay, so that's the end of the first installment. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay, Nicholas, go
on. So it sounds like you're making the case for reviving the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah, no. Actually, I was absolutely no. Hang on, just let me get everyone on the screen so I can see all your loads of more faces instead of seeing my own diagram. Just let me get me. Oh, what I'm doing? Okay. Sorry, I stopped the share. So what do I do? I stopped the share. Then I can see everyone. No, what I'm doing. Okay, just bear with me because I'm kind of quite new. It's terrible, isn't it? It's been locked down for a year and a half. I'm still working out how to use Zoom, for Christ's sake. My baby daughters know how to use Zoom better than I do. So I just see loads of faces instead of seeing my face, basically. So, hang on. Okay, gallery view, gallery view. I don't want to see me. Okay, here. Okay, great. Okay, I'm very careful to distance myself from the occult. I'm very careful to distance myself from Madame Blavatsky and, kind of Aleister Crowley and, existing cults, and also the New Age. I mean, I had a real kind of, fun experience with the New Age in my previous workplace. That's another story. So I think the question earlier, is any country or any place especially spiritualized? Well, the answer is no. But at the same time, all these spiritual organizations, when you dig deep into them, there's something lacking. Do you know what I'm saying? There's something about these gurus, even like quite prominent teachers. You dig behind the scenes, these cult leaders, and there's something not quite right. I think the only real kind of like way of presenting these ideas is through a pure synthesis of science. In fact, I have this idea. I mean, I didn't discuss it in this talk, but in the political talks I've been doing the past couple of years, there is this notion of the separation of church and state. Okay, that's associated with Thomas Jefferson, but it actually comes from the writings of John Locke. Now, the reason why John Locke said that, because he believed that basically Now, what? Now, John Locke was a religious guy, so why is he saying that? Okay, just John Locke said that atheists shouldn't be part of the social franchise. He said atheists can't be trusted to have a moral compass. Okay, so people like Steven Pinker who want enlightenment now. I mean, I don't think he might not want enlightenment now if he knew those kind of passages from John Locke. Okay, so look, okay, John Locke is not an atheist, but he's saying there should be separation between church and state, which is taken up by the famous, kind of quote from Thomas Jefferson, one of the first US presidents. Now, the funny thing is, I'll tell you something. I believe they're right. So you heard loads of stuff about religion and esoteric religion and prisca theologia, and then you're talking about politics. But it's that contradiction where you're saying, these mystical ideas are important for completely changing the world and revising political systems. But then you talk about separation between church and state. Isn't that contradictory? No. This is what I believe. It is necessary to communicate these spiritual religious ideas in a way that's completely rational and scientific. So there should be a separation between scripture and a history of religion, all these kind of mystical passages and psychedelic experiences and mystical beliefs on one hand, and on the other hand, a kind of like a purely scientific description of things that can be accepted purely as science and mathematics and grounded in basically modern science, basically. Now, there's a separation between the two, you see, but everything in science can be made to correspond with mystical. Do you get it? So I believe there's a way of communicating the mystical truth in purely scientific terms, but all these scientific terms then completely have their parallels and resurrect the prisca theologia, the hidden religion. So that's what I believe. So, I've really investigated a land of cults and a land of New Age. I worked in a church for 10 years, which was a major New Age center, kind of like went to every single cult in London just to see what they were saying, what they're thinking, and also get their free food and be like cult bait, pretending to be a convert. Hey, I'm really interested in new ideas and stuff. And you get fed, literally, you have a routine in London and you can just visit a different cult every day and get most of your nutritional needs met. And it's pretty good food because they want to recruit you, They just give you crap food. Okay, so that's my youth. Okay, I just did it in my youth, and things were less. So look, back to the question. Okay, so basically, Order of the Golden Dawn, all this kind of business. I think basically there needs to be a complete revision, and that complete revision needs to be totally grounded in science and rationality. If you want to make it to a mass movement that can really penetrate into the mainstream, then it has to be communicated in purely rational terms. Does that make sense?
When you say science, what do you mean? Do you mean like the scientific method, or are you just generally saying science is like the study of something?
No, I'm saying, okay, this is the next talk. I'll give you a taster. What I'm saying is that basically ideas have come to the fore in the past 5-10 years, literally the past 5-10 years. So for instance, these ideas have existed for centuries, but they've re-emerged and have become part of modern scientific discourse. One example is Max Tegmark has reintroduced the idea of a mathematical universe, that mathematics is, basically a universe is a mathematical object. In an early paper before his recent book, he actually quotes Pythagoras, who says the universe is a number. Pythagoras is the mystic who brought the Greek mysteries from ancient Egypt into Greece. So that's one example of a return of ancient mystical idea, which then explains the idea of a logos in the Bible and St. John Gospel. That's one example. So basically this idea of the universe as a mathematical object, God as a mathematician, that's one aspect. That's the deistic view, that God as a kind of mathematician, as an overarching cosmic process. Now there's other ideas. For instance, Roshan, you're gonna like this, Tero. I know Roshan Tero, I know you're a physicist. There's 3 strands from physics that are all saying that basically the idea in religion of basically purposefulness and meaningfulness, that the universe converges to a set conclusion. I'll just quickly go through this because we have at least one physicist here. Okay, basically, Yakir Aharonov, won the Presidential Medal for Science in 2008, was nominated for the Nobel Prize. He didn't win that, but he won the prestigious US Presidential Medal of Science. Now his idea is destiny wave function, time-symmetric quantum mechanics, So that's mainstream science, guy winning major awards, proposing a destiny wave function. That's his words, not mine. He basically takes quantum mechanics, instead of going forwards in time, he makes it time symmetrical. He's saying that there's a destiny wave function from the future pulling the universe to a set conclusion. So when people tell you that science says that the universe is purposeless, well, not anymore. Okay. Now, okay, the two main contenders for the kind of grand unified theory of the universe, okay, unifying quantum physics with general relativity, they are something called string theory and something called loop quantum gravity. Okay, I better get this right because there's a physicist in the audience. Okay. Okay, both these main contenders for grand unified theory of the universe, okay, they both say, okay, that there's a pre-Big Bang epoch, okay, that's a mirror image of this epoch that we're currently in. Now, there's a thing called CPT symmetry, okay, and these physicists do extrapolate to the universe. What it means is that charge, polarity, and time. Okay, so charge is matter, antimatter. Polarity is basically a mirror image. Okay, you change polarity, it's like a mirror image. Left becomes right, right becomes left. And time, obviously, time. What we're experiencing time going forwards. Now, what CPT symmetry says, if you reverse any one of those charge, polarity, or time, you would have to reverse all the others. Okay. Now, if they're saying that there's a pre-Big Bang epoch that is a mirror image of this universe, then you invert time. And if they're saying basically that the Big Bang is not the Big Bang anymore, it's the Big Bounce, it's not the beginning. Okay, this is a head twister, isn't it? So the Big Bang is the Big Bounce. There's a pre-Big Bang epoch, that's the mirror image of this universe where time flows backwards. But it's not flowing backwards, we're flowing backwards. Okay, do you get it? Okay, so this mirror image, okay, it's like a negative, photographic negative. Positive charge is negative charge. Negative charge is positive charge. You know, positrons, electrons, matter is antimatter. Okay, so what we think we're flowing backwards in time, but we're not. We're bouncing back to the origin. So there's a set conclusion where time flows and generates this, what we see as going backwards in time, going to the Big Bang, and then there's a reflection, a big bounce, and we're bouncing back to the origin. To cut a long story short, what it's saying is that the universe is flowing back to a set conclusion. If you merge these three theories, loop quantum gravity, string theory, with this time symmetric quantum mechanics, there's a unified theory of these three ideas waiting to be discovered. And they're all saying that the universe is purposeful and meaningful in relation to that set conclusion. That is pure science. That is cutting edge mainstream science. These are people winning awards, studying at Harvard, mainstream universities. And it's revising ideas from religion. In fact, the Hermetic texts, Asclepius, which is accompanies Corpus Hermeticum, actually says that necessity follows destiny. i.e., destiny comes first and then necessity follows. And it's saying like time symmetric quantum mechanics. There is that which is necessary, and everything necessary converges to that which is destiny. Do you get it? So that's one example. So look, this is the next talk. I'm saying there's all these little nuggets come together to form a composite picture to explain all the mysteries of the Prisca Theologia in completely 21st century conceptions, including the ultimate puzzle of them all, consciousness. Okay, that this ultimate puzzle, and the answer is basically take all these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, and there's an explanation of consciousness which shows that we're all one consciousness. Corpus Hermeticum, in the words of Corpus, there's only one soul, there's only one life, there's only one matter. Who is that? Who else can it be but the one God? So echoing parallels passages from the Quran, we're all made from one soul, but that one soul is undivisible. Super soul appears divided, but it's never divided. Somehow we're all one person. And there is experience of being one of the universe, being one with God. And that's not illusion, that's the way it is. And I'm saying these nuggets, these facets of modern science, they form a composite picture, not just to explain the mathematical universe and the purposeful universe. It goes on to explain the ultimate mystery of consciousness, to show that the mystery of consciousness and the mystery of the one God are one and the same.
So can I just ask a quick question? When I talk to the Hare Krishna,
go on.
When I talk to like the Hare Krishnas or like Buddhists, they will often say that what they do is spiritual science. Is that the kind of merging of occult or like esoteric knowledge and science that you're talking about? And like why?
I mean, the Hare Krishnas are really like they're really fundamentalist Hinduism. They're really like a distortion of the Vedas. Basically, they're a movement that emerged in really the kind of 14th, 15th centuries, which was thousands of years after Upanishads and Vedas were written. So really, it's false religion. I'm sorry to say that. The food is great, by the way. It's a bit sugary, but it's nice. I mean, okay, it depends on the chef. You get a good chef, you get good food, but it tends to be sugary and fatty. I need to lose weight. Not down. My body's bigger. Bigger weight. Okay, look, I need exercise. Okay, to cut out sugary foods. Okay, digression. Okay, look. Bhakti was a movement that emerged in the 13th, 14th century in India, and basically Hare Krishna is that. There was a philosopher called, the Upanishads and the Vedas is absolutely, you are God. The God, you are that. There's only one soul. Okay, that's what the Vedas are all about. Upanishads are all about that. These were written 1,000 years ago. Now, there's a philosopher called Ramanuja. He came out of a philosophy in the 13th century called qualified non-dualism. So things are not, they're qualified. It's sort of one, but not one. Then later came a philosopher called Madhya in the kind of 14th century. He drew a total separation between a person and a universe and a person and God. And then came this guy called Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the patron saint of the Hare Krishna movement. And he basically promoted these ideas, which were distortions of original Hindu ideas from the Vedas and Upanishads. Do you get it? So Hare Krishna movement is essentially fundamentalist revisionist Hinduism from the medieval times, which completely distorted the original truth of Hinduism. So this reform is not just about science, it's not just about politics, it really is a wide reform of world religion, of New Age sects, of cults, and so it has to be, when we talk about system change, it has to be a kind of reform of all religion in this world, including occult, Sir Crowley, Madame Blavatsky, all this kind of stuff. That's what I believe, yeah. Any more questions? Oh, Roshan.
Yes, so first, thank you for this talk. This is really, really exciting to hear this.
Man, this is great. If I was on my own, I'd just basically talk to the walls. No,
I'm excited for the next talk. But so yeah, with everything you said, I'm gonna read the Corpus Remectium.
Yeah.
It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like something. It sounds like you're implying that sometime far off in the past, there was a time where we as a world society had this figured out, or at least in some parts of the world, and then for some reason we lost it and phased out of that time, and out of that I guess out of this knowledge, and then you might call that the darkness, and then that's what that kind of sounds like you're implying.
That's absolutely, Roshan, that's exactly what I'm saying. And in fact, this wisdom, Pisca Theologia, the esoteric religion, has also been called the perennial wisdom, like perennial grass. It keeps returning and disappearing, returning and disappearing.
Yes.
In the next talk, we're going to link up with the notion of the myth cycle, Joseph Campbell, and things like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Matrix, and Dune, because they basically take the mythic quest cycle. Like King Arthur, comes, but then there's a future King Arthur. It's a cycle, it's cyclical. And this idea that Joseph Campbell is great, you should read him because he's really interesting. George Lucas based Star Wars on the works of Joseph Campbell. Now, basically taught this monomyth where all the world's mythologies are saying the same story. And he also framed Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad in that same context, or the same stereotypical sequence of events, the mystical experience, the kind of Jesus' time in the desert, Buddha's awakening under the Bodhi tree, Muhammad's trip to the seventh heaven and stuff. And basically then they come back and they reform society, which is exactly the same as the philosopher King. So they bring back this knowledge, but the knowledge is so hard to keep hold of. So yes, the knowledge is found, but it keeps getting lost.
And that's the interesting part, though, that I find is like, so why do you think we lose this? How is it so easy to lose this? And why would you, I guess, do you have an idea of how we lost it before?
Oh, okay, yeah, there is an answer. It's because in the same way that it took centuries for the notion that the world is round to be accepted. People knew it. It took centuries for the notion that that really the earth revolves around the sun to be accepted. So Aristarchus, working in Alexandria in the 3rd century BC, knew it. He wrote books about it, and people read his books, so people knew it. When Copernicus introduced the idea, funny, in early drafts of Copernicus's work, he actually mentions Aristarchus, but in the final draft, he expunges the name Aristarchus. So he's really taking his ideas and stealing his ideas, basically. So in the same way, this notion is so verified, it's so hard to understand, that a reason why these books like Corpus Hermeticum, the Bible, don't throw your pearls to the swine, they warn, and the Oration on the Dignity of Man, they warn that you're going to be ridiculed, you're going to be laughed at, and the Corpus Hermeticum is quite explicit, you're going to be murdered. Okay, so Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake, and Pico della Mirandola was murdered because he, told about these truths. So the truth has been waiting for the advancement of knowledge to come to a point where we can finally say the truth in perfectly rational terms, in the same way that the idea that the world is round and the idea that the earth revolves around the sun instead of the other way, had to wait for a certain progression of knowledge to happen before it can be told. Now, this is actually the prophecies. Okay, the word apocalypse means literally the unveiling of the hidden thing. What is that hidden thing? Obviously, if there's a hidden truth in all world religion, in Islam, the Batin in Islam, the Kabbalah in Judaism, the mysteries of Taoism, the kind of Vajrayana Buddhism, the kind of mysteries of Hinduism, separate from movements like Bhakti and Hare Krishna, and esoteric Christianity, if there is a hidden secret behind all world religion, and there is an apocalypse, the unveiling of the hidden thing, surely it's talking about that hidden mystery in world religion. And the beliefs are identical to the Prisca Theologia and the perennial wisdom. So the book of Revelation talks about an unfolding of events on earth that leads to this symbolism of a scroll with 7 seals. And as history progresses, the seals are unfolded. And then at the time of the great happening, the scroll is revealed and the truth comes out, and that is historic apocalypse, the unveiling of the hidden thing. Now, I believe that the progression of science, which came, I'll describe in the next talk, from the Corpus Hermeticum, people like Francis Bacon, the Royal Society, the midwife of modern science, was derived from a Freemason meeting group called Invisible College, whose patron saint was Francis Bacon. You get it? So it's basically Corpus Hermeticum implemented, created modern science. And then modern science progresses knowledge of the universe, ourselves, and everything, to lead to the point we can finally explain the truth of the Corpus Hermeticum, which gave rise to science in the first place. Beautiful, isn't it?
Mm.
In fact, look, this is incredible. I thought of this a few weeks ago. Look, the Renaissance never quite happened. Now, let me explain that. Look, the Oration on the Dignity of Man, I'll tell you what it is. The Oration on the Dignity of Man is a book that's about religion, but it was also a book that was a reference to another book called the 900 Theses, okay, which was the first comprehensively banned book by the Roman Catholic Church. The Oration on Dignity of Man, this very important work, the Manifesto of the Renaissance, what it's saying is basically, it's an invitation to a disputation, a kind of debate with the wise men or the clever people of the Vatican, the Catholic Church. And in it, he says basically, look, in the strident tone, the last paragraph, he says basically, Pico della Mirandola, okay, there's a great many things I know. There's a great many things I know that other people don't know. Let us join in debate and I'll show you these things. Let the trumpets sound as for battle. Let us join in debate. Now, the debate never happened. Pico della Mirandola invited all these scholars from all of Italy to debate. It was banned by the Roman Catholic Church. And the ideas went underground and was championed by organizations like Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. Okay, so even though the Renaissance gave rise to the modern world, modern science, all these revolutionary movements, it never quite happened. And the really dramatic narrative is to say that in our lifetimes, in the 21st century, we can realize the true, bona fide, real deal, genuine apocalypse through the progression of science and fully realize the aims of Pico della Mirandola. We can fully manifest the Renaissance that was never quite fully born during the Italian Renaissance. Isn't that a powerful narrative?
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. Yeah,
oh, man, it's like you need narratives, because people know stories and people follow.
Yes, exactly.
That is mind blowing, isn't it? That's obviously, and the really powerful thing about this message, we understand that Prisca Theologia, the perennial wisdom, is identical to these other, esoteric cores of world religion. It's not just for Europe. So this is quite a Europe-centric talk. It's actually universal, and we actually. Now, the psychedelic religion, there's my interest in psychedelics. I mean, I'm not taking anything, psychedelic in years, basically, decades. So I feel like a bit of a phony when I talk to psychedelic societies. Now, my interest in psychedelics is basically quite large doses on certain psychedelics like LSD. You have God trips. You have experiences of being one with the universe. And these transform your life, and you basically spend the rest of your life trying to either chase it, which is not a good thing because you basically destroy your mind, or you basically try and understand it and try and bring it back into the world. Okay, in terms of the universality, all world religion, but then it connects with this psychedelic religion. But then we realize that indigenous religion, shamanism, indigenous religions in Africa, South America, it's the same truth. How's that for universal? So yeah, it's powerful, it's mind-blowing, but it's really, I think it communicates in the right way with this fusion of science, with this kind of fusion of, kind of politics, kind of science, and the situation in the world today. I think, it needs to be really fine-tuned, it needs to be honed, it needs to be communicated in such clever, interesting ways, stories, kind of all kinds of people need to promote it in their different kind of contexts. Obviously, to communicate to the world of Islam, it's going to take young Muslims to do it, and to China, obviously, Chinese people versed in Marxism, Taoism, Confucianism, and obviously India, you're going to need young Indians to do it in India. So it is a powerful core message that can really, kind of communicate to, it won't be accepted by all people in this world, but it can really penetrate into vast numbers of people. The really incredible fact is that, okay, 2 years ago I read, and this is corroborated fact, 41% of all the people on this planet 2 years ago are under the age 24. That's incredible, isn't it? 41% under age 24, and there are going to be lots of unemployed 24 under, young people basically. And there's going to be another 2-3 billion people appearing on this planet, and I can tell you a fact: these are going to be young people. And these young people are going to inherit a kind of, the ecological disaster. They're going to inherit climate change, future pandemics, and they're going to be looking for something different from the old ideologies that are causing division, war. They're going to be looking for something new. So there's kind of old fogies like me talking about these kind of things, but there's kind of a huge wave of people. Okay, older people who are seeking, who basically, exposed these ideas in the 60s and the early 70s. They might have grown up in cults, might have grown up with Aleister Crowley, but they're seeking. And I think basically, even though these ideas seem really kind of quite, it's a paradigm shift. Okay, basically, these ideas will be rejected. People will laugh. People will basically really think this is crazy. That's the nature of paradigm shift. It's going to be surprising. But you see the logic behind it. When you have the weight of history behind you, when you have the weight of rationality and science behind you, that's a really powerful combination. If you can actually address it in a way to the problems of this world, climate change, ecological catastrophe, then that's a pretty powerful combination, I believe. Okay. Any other questions?
Go ahead. So whoever wants.
Any other questions?
It sounds like you're advocating for pantheism.
Sorry, who said that? And what would you say? Advocating for what?
Pantheism, like Spinoza and Giordano Bruno.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes. I mean, okay. The mystical truth. There's two levels basically. There is this pantheism idea that God is in everything. Yeah, God saturates everything. That's very Spinoza. I mean, that's very German romantic philosophers. Wolfgang Goethe, all these kind of people, Schelling, nature mysticism. God is in nature. God is in the universe. There is that. There is another mystical idea. Yes, God is everywhere. God infuses everything, but God is also one. That the totality of that which is pantheistic is in you. So yes, it is pantheism, but at the same time, it is basically, yes, we are like a drop in this huge ocean that is God. But the really controversial idea, which I'll explain next talk, is that we also contain the entire ocean. So yes, it is pantheism, but it's something which is far more extreme. And okay, for a social movement, you don't say, look, it's not a cult. You don't say you have to believe this extreme idea that we're all one soul, that we are literally God in totality. That experience of being one of the universe and one of God is absolute truth. Because it's not a cult, you need to make it into a social movement. So what you do is you have a spectrum of belief, and that's the extreme spectrum. We have to accommodate the entire spectrum. So in the same way that, okay, we know that the Earth revolves around the sun, but at the same time, it is not wrong to say that the sun rises and the sun sets. Now, take an absolute pedant to contradict you and say, you say, oh, I'll meet you at sunrise or sunset, and an absolute pedant would say, no, the sun's not rising, literally. Basically, the Earth is revolving around the sun, and the Earth spins. So that's a belief on one level. It seems as if the sun does rise and set. So on one level, yes, we're all one. We are all God. But we have to accommodate materialism, that it seems as if things are material, and there's many of us, there's billions of people on this planet. We also have to accommodate the fact that, yes, the universe is purposeful according to this latest science, but it can seem purposeless if we don't know what that purpose is. So that's what I think we need to do. But this is for the third talk, really. So I'm kind of giving a taster of the kind of nuts and bolts of the message and how you actually communicate to people and turn it into a social movement. So any more questions?
I was gonna say, should we make this the last question? Because I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up.
Wow, my God, it's hour and 45 minutes. That felt like half an hour. That felt like.
There's one last thing I wanted to ask. You won't necessarily have to answer this because it might be a big answer, but
so Russia,
seeing how this seems cyclical, what that would imply is that even if we do sort of transform into this new age or new, whatever we might want to call it, it sounds like after some period of time, eventually the same process would undergo.
Okay. It's cyclical and it's linear at the same time. Again, this idea of like of the spectrum of belief. Okay, what I believe is basically, okay, there's been rise and falls of civilization, and it seems like a Sisyphus pushing that stone up and then it falls down, pushing that stone up and it falls down. But what it is that basically there comes critical junctures where we arrive at a phase change. Okay, in the same way the cell works, the cell that's found in plants and animals, and basically you have the basic design, and it's honed, and it's basically that same design is basically propagating all over the planet. All the trees and all the animals have that same basic design and DNA and stuff. And I think that this notion that eventually society, humans organize to a point, a planetary level, where things have arrived at that point of stability, and you might use the word perfection. And then from there, the next phase is to the stars. That same basic design then propagates to other planets into the galaxy. But then, okay, then the truth is lost, but the truth is not lost in terms of the societies then collapsing back into decay. In the same way, the cells, animals come and go, species fall and die and stuff, but the cell structure remains the same. So the basic societal organization has been perfected. But then it's Star Wars. It's there's organisms whose bodies are the galaxies, thinking, what is this mysticism crap? What is this force stuff? I don't believe in the force. Do you get it?
Yes.
So on a societal level, things are stabilized. Now, what is the end? The end is when all matter in the universe becomes this cosmic Christ, this celestial Buddha, this universal Vishnu. That is the end, when the entire universe becomes a single organism, realizes, oh my God, I am God, has a final enlightenment, but then also realizes my physical body is also the entire universe. And that is the end. That is God emergent. That is the end, but that's also the beginning. And then cyclically, it begins again. Did you get it? So the other thing,
that's fucking mind blowing.
Well, man, Roger Penrose won the Nobel Prize recently, for physics, and he advocates the cyclical universe. So Einstein followed the cyclical universe, but he abandoned it because the empirical data then didn't support it. But the recent stuff to do with dark energy has brought back the cyclical universe back in vogue, which is great because it's exactly ancient cosmology, ancient kind of mystical cosmology. That's another kind of teaser from the next talk. Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Wow, that's 1 hour 40. That's 1 hour 50 minutes. That's incredible. That's really well, guys. Thanks. I mean, that's amazing. I don't have to drive home. I don't have to, I don't have to make my way to a hotel, and this is great. We'll do more of these. We'll maybe have them next week. What do you think? What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I've got to check my thing because I've still got some assignments and stuff, but I can have a look.
So we're going to do one really soon. So keep a look on Facebook and my social media, and we'll do the next talk, which would be this complete synthesis between science and religion. We'll do that next week or at some point really soon. Okay. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here with me in my spare room, and And we shall, any questions, just write, and I'll try my best to answer. We'll come to next talk and, ask any questions you have to ask. And great, fantastic. So,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for.